Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'll be showing you how I made some super easy embellished pants for my current work-in-progress doll, which is a kid version of Vaughn from my fantasy series The Snake's Blood Saga. This project starts by putting the front and back pieces of each leg together, and sewing them together down the outer leg seam. I backstitch at the top edge where the waist is. The secret for these pants is that they're made with stretchy material, so they're really more like leggings, but cut a little looser through the seat and legs so they have a more relaxed fit. If you have any old t-shirts laying around, jersey knit works super well for these. After the seams are sewn, it's time to embellish. Since this is a stretchy material, you'll want to use some kind of stabilizer underneath the fabric to keep it from stretching as you sew the embellishments. I'm using a scrap of Swedish tracing paper, which I use a lot for pattern making, but you can use tearaway stabilizer, newspaper, or even just computer paper if that's what you have. The goal is just to keep the feed dogs from stretching the fabric. The seam should be open flat on the underside against the paper, so if you're embellishing by machine, check regularly to make sure it's still flat as you're working. I use my machine for this, obviously, and a lot of modern sewing machines have some decorative stitches built in that work great for this, but you could also do embroidery by hand, stitch on decorative beads, or if you aren't feeling that ambitious, you could try sewing on a piece of ribbon or lace that has a design you like. I use embroidery machine thread for this because it's really sleek and shiny, but it can be done with regular thread or metallic thread if you want a little extra sparkle. Run your decoration down the seam of the pant legs, and whenever you're done, you can tear off whatever you used as stabilizer. This gives me a really simple but attractive design of different circles, and I think the gold embroidery thread I used for it looks really pretty against the black material. If your machine doesn't have decorative stitches to choose from, a zigzag stitch or even just a regular straight stitch could look really cool if you use a unique thread for it. After both legs have been embellished, you'll want to put the two halves of the pants together with the right sides together and pin along the edge of what will be the front center seam. Sew the seam closed and trim your threads. Then trim the seam allowance so there's not so much fabric to bunch up in the front of the pants. I usually cut mine in half from my standard 1/4 inch seam allowance down to about 1/8, and then finish the edge with a zigzag stitch. Next, fold over the top edge of the pants to create the waistband. Since it's a knit fabric, the edge can be left without any finishing needed, which makes our job here a little easier. Sew the waistband with a zigzag or multi-step elastic zigzag stitch, which looks like a regular zigzag, but dashed lines representing several small stitches instead of one big one. This helps preserve the waistband's ability to stretch to fit the doll nicely. My machine has a little trouble going over the thickness of the embroidery when it's doubled up like that, so I pull really firmly to help move things along, but not so hard that I'll miss stitches. Now the back seam can be folded shut, pinned together, and sewn. Since this finishes the end of the waistband, I backstitch at the top where the waist is to prevent the seam from coming undone. Then, just like with the front, you'll want to trim your seam allowance and then finish the edge of this seam with the zigzag stitch. The bottom of each pant leg needs to be hemmed too, so just like with the waistband, fold the edge to the inside by about 1/4 inch, and then sew it down with your zigzag or multi-step zigzag stitch. Repeat that process for both legs. We're close to being done now. Make sure your thread tails are trimmed, then fold the pants so you can close the legs with one long inseam. I like to pin first at the cuff of the pants and the crotch seam, then align the fabric edges in between. Once you're satisfied with your pinning, begin at the edge of one cuff, backstitch to bind it tight, and sew all the way along this edge to the other cuff. Backstitch there too so your seam won't come apart. As we did with the front and back seams, it's a good idea to cut the seam allowance down smaller to reduce bulk. Then finish the inseam with a zigzag stitch. Once you're done zigzagging, your fancy pants are officially done and ready for your doll to wear. I used a dowel rod to help me turn them right side out, and now they're good to go. I love how these look, and the fit around the waist is great. So these are a great option for layering in fantasy outfits, and I love having these as another option for this doll to wear. That's all for today though. Thanks for watching. Bye.